Whether we are there or not, ITSP Magazine still gets the best stories. Plenty of conferences and events spark our curiosity and allow us to start conversations with some of the world's brightest minds. In person or virtually, Sean Martin and Marco Ciappelli go on location and sit down with them at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Together, we discover what the synergy of these three elements means for the future of humanity. ThreatLocker is a zero-trust endpoint protection platform, providing enterprise-level cybersecurity to organizations globally. With ThreatLocker, you only allow only what you need and block everything else, including ransomware. Learn more at threatlocker.com.
Check. Look who's here.
Okay. who is here? It's like
I don't know. Wherever I go is here. Like San Francisco, London.
What I'm doing is I'm just checking your schedule, and then I kind of feel like, I feel like it's a good time to, I can go to that place and we can catch up, meet up,
right?
have a good chat.
I loved it. Like I was just sitting in the hotel the other night, and I'm like, catching up on things, and then here you go, walk in.
You know what the funny thing was? Is as I was walking, I was like, it's a pretty long day. I'm walking through. I've got my luggage. I've been on multiple flights. And obviously, I see the trainers. I go, I've seen those before. As they slowly look up, of course, who was it? Marco.
Yeah, I like to change the color and go yellow, orange, now white. But as long as they're comfortable. Right?
That's the important thing.
We walk a lot here.
Yeah, we do. We walk a lot. And these conference centers get longer distances that you have to get between places. So.
Yeah.
Listen, as an exhibition and a conference.
Yes.
So 2 centers in one.
Yeah, and people may be wondering, what the hell are they talking about? Where are they now?
Yes,
we are in Melbourne. It's been raining, but now it's sunny.
It was pouring
only in 5 minutes.
As soon as Joe entered the scene,
the sun came out. So
that. The sky is blue above
rainbows and unicorns.
I'm hoping the planes are flying this evening as well. I stay on schedule.
Right. Oh, yeah. You'll be
you had a delay getting in, didn't you?
I had a delay getting in on Monday, so it was like every flight was 2 hours later. But I was lucky enough to get in earlier, like change my flight to an earlier one. So I didn't get here too late. It was not too bad.
Not too bad.
Very cool. And you did a session here?
Absolutely, I did. I did a session yesterday morning, and it was right after the keynote. It was a packed room. There's like no places, like the back wall just had people standing around. And I think one of the things is that the topic was all around taking people through a real world ransomware case and showing the lessons learned. It's not often you get companies who become victims to allow you to speak on their behalf, to share the really insights and details about the good things that happen and also the bad things. And I think for the audience coming in, and of course in this region, it is becoming a very hot area for increased ransomware attacks. And they want to learn. They want to learn from organizations who were victims and about what things went wrong and what things went right. And that session takes them through. And during the session, I like to show live. Like I like to show them the real thing. So I recreated the ransomware attack exactly to the detail. And I actually share that and I walk them through and take them through not just from a victim perspective, but also from the hacker perspective, to show them about when an attacker sees something, this is what they're thinking about when they see that. And then if they come across some type of security control that's preventing them from moving forward, the thought process around how they're thinking, how do I get around that? And then how do they augment their techniques? And ultimately it gets to the point where I showed, we had a big hype this year around attackers using AI and AI becoming the big trend. But during that session, I showed them that attackers don't need to use AI today because the basics still work. They are using it in certain areas, but the basics still work. They're still stealing credentials. People are still reusing passwords. They're still able to crack them. They're still able to go on the dark web and buy them and get that initial access. And ultimately,
there's no 2FA, MFA.
Yeah. They do have, but the problem is they have MFA, but not 100%. And the attackers are really good at finding those accounts where MFA is just not turned on, or they do have MFA, but they've actually enabled so many other security controls, right down to security questions, so that MFA is the strongest, but they don't have to use that. They can go and say, well, let's go and do security questions. So security in MFA is only as good as the weakest security that you've actually put in place.
Interesting.
And they bypass it very easily.
Well, so what was the reaction of a room pack of people when you actually show that. Maybe a lot of people would expect, oh, it's going to be all about AI, and you're like, no. There's a hammer and there's a nail.
Absolutely. So the interesting thing, so what came around was a lot of the questions that came out, and the people came up afterwards, and they were like, yeah, oh my goodness, we were a victim, and exactly the same steps that you just showed was what we experienced. So you get that acknowledgement. You also get others thinking, oh my goodness, my environment has those same misconfigurations or overprivileged users, and they're now in a scenario about what can we do today in order to prevent and reduce that risk, so to make the business more resilient. And I think the good thing is that those who were victims, they acknowledge it, and they going, yes, we're glad we made the steps to prevent it for the future. And then those others that haven't become victims yet, that have the risk, are now in the case of thinking about, we need to take action immediately. We need to take this knowledge, go to our management, go to our teams, and find ways around how they can prioritize to make sure that they do the right things and make it difficult for attackers.
Now, there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of days around the new Cyber Act, I believe it is, which requires disclosure of a ransomware attack. And I don't know, how deep does that disclosure go? Does it capture some of the what?
The news for me is not that it requires that you disclose, it's that it allows you to pay it. Which in other countries is not even. I mean, I know. I'm just. There's two angles to this. That I like your opinion on both.
And I mean, so I did listen to the sessions around the new act and the law, and for me, it doesn't have enough let's say, punishment to do responsible disclosure on incidents. I think a lot of organizations look at it and think that the penalty is so low that let's avoid it. So what you're doing is you're not kind of getting the right incentive in order to get the information to help you make better decisions. What you're doing is you're putting in place is that that the penalty for actually not reporting is actually so minimal that organizations will be like, well, if I report, I will have a bigger impact versus just not reporting and paying the penalty if I do get found out. So I think that it is a good idea, but I don't think the execution has been really thought through.
To me, that, and we'll cover your point in a second, but I think what I've heard is it was an incentive to be open.
Yes, the transparency.
And what I'm hearing from you is that it's still a penalty-driven. People aren't going to do it, or organizations aren't going to do it because of the perceived negative impact still.
Correct. So interesting. So one of the things during my talk yesterday, I went through a scenario and I showed them that as I was doing the digital forensics and the incident response, and I had all the logs, and I was looking through the logs, and during that specific incident, I found evidence of another victim. So, and that's common, is when you're investigating cases that you'll find that the attackers copy-paste a lot of their payloads, and then they copy-paste logs from other victims, and as you're going through, I find usernames, passwords, IP addresses, domain names of another company, of another victim, sitting right in the logs. So I thought, okay, I got permission. I went and got authorization to contact that company. And then interesting, so I'm dealing with an organization which was a large transportation company who's a victim, and they're going through the response. And then I find evidence of a large entertainment sports organization, huge, that they were also a victim. So I got permission, I contacted them proactively. I went on the website, found out the contacts for the security team, disclosure. I reached out, I sent information saying that I'm investigating another case. I find evidence of data that relates back to you, and some domain names, and shared some of the IP addresses, and said, maybe we can share, maybe we can collaborate together and find out what things they did. Maybe it's the same criminals, maybe we can share indicators of compromise. And not long after, I was within minutes, I got a response back saying, you're wrong, we weren't the victim. The information you have is not correct. And I was confused because you said, I'm looking at it.
Really?
I go to the domain and look up at everything, and everything's pointing back to them. So I thought, maybe they haven't discovered their victim. So I went and I contacted them again not long after the response. I said, maybe they're just actually in the progress of going to deploy the ransomware. Maybe if we act fast, we could stop you from becoming a victim. So I thought I was doing all of this proactive and doing the right thing. And so I reached out and I was like, let's stop it. And no response. And I was thinking, okay, I thought, well, I'm not going to push it. I don't want to kind of get into that, pushing you kind of enforcement, because if they're not willing to work with you, then it's going to be difficult to kind of cooperate. So I left it at that. And the specific case that I was working on took about 3 months end to end from when I started to when I finished. And at the end, I had to go and I had to collect all of my evidence, and I have to archive it, and I have to then hand it over to the organization's legal team, and then they will work with law enforcement and work with other agencies in order to potentially try and find the criminals in attribution and legal side. So as I was gathering that evidence, I thought, hold on a minute, what I've got here in these disks has actually this other victim's information. I thought it was my due diligence to let them know. So I thought, right at the end, 3 months later, I sent another communication to that company. I said, hey, just to let you know, I finished up my investigation. The evidence that I've got that relates back to your domain names and IP addresses and passwords is now being handed over to legal and law enforcement. They might decide later to contact you. And that was it. And then again, right afterwards, response saying, yes, you were right. We were a victim. We paid the ransom, and we don't want to kind of publicly disclose it. So thank you for informing us, and that was the end of it. So for me, it was a bit where you're dealing with this. It shows you that there's a lot of organizations out there of all different sizes that they're paying the ransom. And it's not up to me to decide whether they pay the ransom or not, but I think it's, we need a way to collect the data and to understand about what's working, what's not working. Because the more information we get back, the better we can understand the techniques and methods the attackers are using. We can put things in place to stop them. And if we're not getting that visibility, I think the law and the regulations should be all about transparency, to work together collaboratively. But unfortunately, most of them are that punishment. You report, if you don't report, you get more punished than when you do report. And I think that's the negative side of things. And I think we had to find ways. I think the one good thing I heard about the law, at least, is that if you do report, that it doesn't get shared further, because the previously law that they had in place allowed the government to share it with other agencies. Now, at least, it stops at the national cert or the reporting organization. So at least that's
like the HIPAA one. You report to healthcare, and then it becomes public.
Yes. So at least there's that changes, which limits the further disclosure with other government agencies. And that's a positive, but there's a lot of work to be done.
So let's talk about ethical, right? So actually yesterday right here, and he just walked by, Miko, you saw it. And I was thinking, we talked about this, right? He mentioned the fact that it was a ransomware a few years ago in Finland, I believe,
yes.
That was about mental health care, and it was very, very, very bad.
Yes.
So we talked about the fact that, there are certain circumstances that it's probably better to pay the ransomware because the damage is going to be less. But if you, in general, allow to become the ransomware the standard, it's then, for me, become a business like another.
Yes.
So, I don't know.
So there's an ethical thing. I mean, when it gets down to it, is that years ago I was on the stance, don't pay the ransom. I was adamant, but I realized that I'm a technical person. I'm a person who looks at risk, and I'm looking at security controls about detection, prevention, all those things. And there was a moment when I realized, and this actually goes back to, it was the time when NotPetya was happening. And there was an incident that I got basically asked to help provide some expertise on. And at that time I was like, ransom, don't pay. And I realized that actually I'm wrong. I can't be the person to make that advice or suggestion. It comes down to the business. The business has to be the ones that makes that decision. It's a business decision because they have to decide whether the business will continue or not. And paying the ransom or not could be a situation where the business may not survive. And there was a situation that there was a cancer research company that was impacted by a ransom back during NotPetya. And I was like, they lost 5 years of data. And you're thinking about, that's data that's so sensitive to research and to people's lives and the future, and it sets them back 5 years. So lucky enough, I mean, not all criminals are ethical, but the negotiator who worked in that case contacted the ransomware criminals, and they were showing them that, this is the type of data that you've impacted. but most criminals, they see it as a business. It's a business model for them.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get those that might have some moral compass, and this one did. So for a nominal fee, they actually provide the key and unlock the data. But that was the moment I realized that we as the security people, we can't be the ones that makes that decision. It has to come down to the business, the legal, the country, and they have to make the decision. One of the things I have found that's been interesting is that in the last couple of years, we've had lots of sanctions go in place, and sanctions actually have been a way that has actually changed the ransomware landscape, because those criminals who operate in countries where the sanctions are in place, it's got more difficult for them to get paid. So they've actually, let's say, kind of decentralized their model. One of the things that they have done is they've moved some of their operations to other countries where sanctions are not in place. Some of those places being the likes of Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Indonesia, where they have ways to operate around the sanctions, so bypassing it, just like they've done with tariffs. They've done the same in ransomware gangs. The other thing what they've done as well is they've targeted countries where those sanctions are in place. So North America and Europe have actually been less targeted from ransomware gangs because the getting paid part is more difficult and hiding the financial tracks. So what they've done is they've moved into targeting countries such as Central America, Latin America, Africa, and Australia, and other countries in this region where they don't have those financial sanctions in place, or even the regulation and governance to put really strict cybersecurity controls in place to protect. So where places have less controls in place and easier ways of doing the payments, attackers will focus on those because they're monetary focused. They want to get paid quick. They want to be able to hide the monetary track because the laundering the money is where they lose the most. And if they have to launder it less and less people in that trail, then they make more profit. So this is where you're seeing the shift into choosing countries where it's easier to target, less security in place, no sanctions, easier to get paid, less people in the chain, and more profit.
But do you think that if you allow, like in this case in Australia, the ransomware to be paid as long as you disclose, that could be an advantage into then, again, working together, involve the government, involve investigative agency and the cyber criminal, the cybersecurity community, and actually say, all right, we'll pay, but we're also making a gain against these people?
I think that it's what you're doing is you're showing the criminals that they have a business model in your region. And what you want to do is you want to make it difficult for the actually business model to be successful. And the way to do that is increasing the security for everybody. And then if you do have responsible disclosure without the penalties in place, then it allows you to understand the techniques better. And if you understand that the methods that's being used, you can make sure that the right security controls are being enforced as well. So it's about making the balance and making it where the attackers will see that this country is actually more difficult, and they will again diversify their business and choose other countries where it's much easier. Because at the end of the day, it's all about monitoring. It's about also time and how much effort it is to get victims to pay and get ransomware deployed on victims, and therefore they will choose easier locations. So this is where it's really about stepping it up and working together, because it's a collaborative effort. We all have to basically work together. We all have to see about how attackers are changing what they're doing, how they're doing the payments, and then making sure it's more difficult for that to be successful. So one of the things we will see in our industry is there's going to be a convergence between the financial part and the cyber part. Right now they're both operated separately. You've got cyber, who's doing basically the security controls, the digital attribution, and then of course you've got the money part, which is actually doing the money laundering and the payments and the kind of, and we will see an overlay between those two industries cooperating to understand more the financial part and the digital cyber part as well. Interesting, one of the things that I got asked the question, I mentioned a bit about the AI side of things. I have seen AI being used in some of the ransomware techniques. Not a lot, but in some areas. The area that I've seen the most is around the language and social engineering. For example, being based in Estonia, Estonian language is so complex. It has been a level of protection for the country from social engineering and phishing campaigns for a long time. So because if I got phishing campaigns 3-4 years ago, it was easy to spot because there were so many mistakes in the language and the grammar. You could see it was machine generated, it wasn't very good. So for the citizens, it was very easy to detect social engineering and phishing for a long time. Then you get generative AI. And what that's done is that it's allowed attackers to do much more accurate and authentic looking phishing and social engineering campaigns, where it's now the language is no longer protection. They're able to do it in a way that it looks perfect. It's even better than some people's own grammar. So you can actually, it's getting, almost too perfect. So you can then, maybe we'll look at the opposite side of the scale. So yeah, language is no longer protection. Actually, in Estonia, in Finland, they're now having to start thinking about different measures because they've relied on that for a long time. And now they have a different strategy now because of generative AI is removing one of those protections. So language, social engineering, phishing on the rise. Of course, we see deepfakes, and that is also a major area of concern. The other area I've seen attackers using it is in data analytics. So when they get basically, they gain access to a victim, they do a massive data exfiltration. It used to take them weeks and months to analyze about what data they've got. What's the data? What the value is? Is there financial information in there? Is there credit card details? Is there credentials? Is there information about other access or controls? They've basically got so much data, and it used to take them weeks and months to analyze it. And now they can do it in seconds. And that's the other thing is that
they can print a map of the network.
Exactly, they can take that and they can say, hey,
what I got here.
show me, exactly. Like they've got models that say, how much can I actually demand in ransom from this data?
Wow.
And that will also give them some ideas about what's the ransom likely, the extortion or money they can demand from the data value that they've got. So this is where the analyzing of the data has become so accelerated. Wow. So that's another area. Into some of all the other things we've seen on the AI trends, it's mostly been on the defensive side and researchers. Sure. Researchers looking at creating malware and creating different variants and so forth, and getting it to reveal code and other things that it shouldn't be. How to bypass the guardrails. So a lot of it's in the research. But the good thing is AI is being heavily used more in defense. But until we get the basic controls correct and increase those, attackers won't need to change because they're still able to do what they need to do today without the need to spend a lot of GPU power. Then rather the GPUs being used for crypto mining rather than being used or cracking passwords rather than being used for basically generative AI.
Maybe as we wrap, and I don't know if you have the numbers, I certainly wouldn't expect you to remember them off the top of your head, but I'm doing this math in my head of if somebody pays the ransom,
yes,
that amount, let's just give it a figure of 100,
yep,
whatever it is, 100. How many victims can be reached with that 100 payment?
Okay, so, in
other words, are we enabling, by one victim paying, are we enabling another 50 to be compromised?
So let's go back. I think one of the good examples was probably the Conti takedown, because that revealed a lot of insights because they were able to get the command and controls. I've used Conti as a baseline. The reports that we had before Conti was taken down was that they had gathered around $500 million, about 500 million in ransom payments. That's what we saw from the outside, from reports, from known victims, from disclosures and all of that. So it was approximately around 500 million. When they took Conti down, actually the real figures was in excess of $1 billion. So you start seeing is that what was really being paid is what we had the transparency is that it was actually twice, even 2-3 times more than what we know about. So we have to start thinking about is that yes, if we know or we have an idea of the amount of ransom being paid, we can probably estimate it's probably somewhere between 2 and 3 times that is the reality. So I think that's what we're looking at. And of course, those who pay, it's not guaranteed that they're going to get their data back. Some of the decryption processes and the keys are horrible. They're single-threaded. They don't work. The time to recover might be days, weeks, and months. And you have to look at that. Is that an efficient way to recover? So one of my recommendations is that if you want to minimize and reduce the risk, have a very strong ransomware resilient backup process. And then the second thing is make sure that you've got a very good identity and credential management process as well to really minimize a lot of the main areas that attackers are using and abusing. And have just a really good knowledge and insights. Just stay educated. Listen to your podcast and episodes, because sharing gives it that intelligence. And the more that we can get it out there, of what works and what doesn't work and what things you should be concerned about, I think the more we make the world a safer place.
Yeah, and also just my perspective I'm thinking right now is that the countries that are more resilient as a country, then they can allow to trickle the ransomware business into countries that are already underdeveloped.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like adding to the burning of a third country.
Absolutely, and that means is that we have to reach out to those countries and help.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Collaboration, cooperation,
again,
in the interest of
and
everyone.
intelligence sharing and knowledge about what works and what doesn't work. So as we basically make ourselves better, the only way, and it goes back to, I remember there was a project I worked on many years ago, and this was a risk assessment for a large car manufacturer. And one of the things that what we realized, and this goes back to that example you're saying, is when we rolled out the security kind of controls and security awareness training, security doesn't start with the employees. We realized that actually, because it was interesting, we had to bring your kids to work day, and it was realizing when we actually did a project and we had the kids helping us, the organization realizes actually with their employees, security doesn't start in the office, and it doesn't start with the employees. It starts with your social sphere.
Yeah.
And the more
exactly.
you push out security further and further and further into the culture, into the society, the more better we protect each other.
Yeah.
And I think, some countries are doing that well in their society, and other countries not so well, and we have to reach out and we have to bring everyone up together, because the more we push out that boundary, the less success criminals will have when it comes to those criminal techniques, and the less places they'll have to operate from as well.
Yep.
And that's one of the key things, is that we've all a joint kind of passion is making the world a safer place, both in physical and online. And I think the way that we get there is by cooperation.
I love it. That's what it's all about. I think.
You closed it.
You did close it.
Oh, thank you.
That's the final word.
Well, it was great to see you
and
here,
only.
my friend.
As always, it's great talking with everyone, and hopefully that this has been valuable.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, I really enjoy being on your podcast. Everybody, just stay tuned. This is second day. There's still another day, and we get many more conversation, either in the room where they locked us and throw away the keys, or right here where we actually got the sun out.
And the sun come in minutes.
Hopefully it stays this way for the next couple of days.
Yeah, that's right.
All right,
Awesome.
thanks,
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
ThreatLocker is a zero-trust endpoint protection platform providing enterprise-level cybersecurity to organizations globally. With ThreatLocker, you only allow what you need and block everything else, including ransomware. Learn more at threatlocker.com. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Sean and Marco's on-location event coverage conversations. Please take a moment to give the show a good rating and leave a comment. Remember to share this podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. Come back for more conversations and follow Sean Martin and Marco Ciappelli as they continue their journey toward redefining cybersecurity and society.